The red lights flashed continuously inside the hangar of the human reconnaissance starship. The Nebula-X alarms blared, echoing off the metal walls and into the ears of the crew. Captain Riker was about to make a decision that would determine the mission's future, and possibly humanity's. "Everyone, to the command room. Now," he ordered, his voice rough, eyes locked on the screen in front of him. It displayed footage from drones sent to survey the alien planet Goren. None of them had returned. Worse, the last transmissions from the drones captured something chilling. A massive creature with a pulsating alien crown and eyes that seemed to pierce through time and space itself. She was the Queen, a higher mind who ruled her planet and bent everything within it to her will. In the command room, Chief Engineer Amy Lin waited for Riker with her tablet in hand. She was one of the brightest minds on the crew, a natural strategist, but her expression showed that even her sharp mind couldn't ease the tension they faced. "Captain, if we enter Goren's atmosphere, we'll be in the palm of her hand." Riker nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "The Queen has already detected us. We don't have time to retreat without getting hit. Our only option is to go in, but we'll need to be ready for what's down there." Amy glanced at the data on her tablet, frowning. "It seems that the Queen has some kind of energy field that disables all of our equipment. The drones were incapacitated as soon as they entered her range. We need to find a way to neutralize that field before anything else." Riker nodded, trying to stay focused. "The one thing we have going for us is that she doesn't fully understand our technology yet. We might still be able to use that against her." The sharp voice of Nathan, the communications officer, cut through the silence. "Captain, I'm picking up a direct transmission from the Queen. It's like she wants to communicate." Riker looked at Amy. "Do we have a choice?" "Put it through." The screen in front of them lit up, displaying a colossal feminine figure, scaled skin glistening, her eyes reflecting a dark, superior intelligence. Her voice echoed like thunder, yet smooth and hypnotic. "Humans, you venture where you do not belong. This is my domain, and all who enter here belong to me." The Queen smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "There is no room here for your feeble tricks." Amy clenched her fists, holding back her unease. Riker cracked his neck, bracing himself to respond. "You may control your planet, Queen, but not our resolve." He cut off the transmission, turning to his team. "This is about survival now." As Riker and his crew scrambled to form a plan, Engineer Amy noticed a pattern in the Queen's transmission records, a specific frequency that seemed to interfere with the energy field. She paused, calculating the possibilities, and then called Riker aside. "Captain, I think I can create an interference wave strong enough to disrupt her field for a few minutes," Amy explained urgently. "That might give us time to act. We just need to distract her long enough to weaken her connection to the energy shield." Riker held her gaze for a long moment. It was a risky idea, probably suicidal, but the best one they had. He knew that if anyone could outsmart the Queen, it would be Amy. "Do whatever it takes," he said, a touch of hope in his voice. Amy nodded, preparing to face the greatest battle of her life, armed only with intelligence, courage, and a nearly impossible plan. The Nebula-X cut through the upper atmosphere of Goren, its reinforced hull shaking under the stress. The planet below was a wasteland of dark valleys and jagged mountains, covered by an endless red haze. Alien storms rolled across the land, and lightning crackled through thick clouds, illuminating glimpses of towering, ominous structures. Amy studied the terrain on her console, every sensor on high alert. "Captain, we're in her range," Nathan announced, his voice edged with tension. "If the Queen's energy field activates, we could lose power at any moment." Riker scanned the room, seeing his own nerves reflected in the crew's faces. He took a steadying breath and turned to Amy, his most reliable officer. "You ready with that interference signal, Lin?" Amy gave a nod, her fingers dancing over her console as she locked in coordinates. "The field should work, but it's going to put a strain on our systems. We might only get one shot at this." "One shot is all we need," Riker replied, more confidently than he felt. You'll be coordinating with the rest of us the whole way. Let's make it count. As the ship descended, every member of the crew felt a sudden heaviness, like a weight pressing on their chest. The atmosphere here was denser, stifling, and Riker couldn't shake the feeling that they were entering a trap. Goren's skies crackled with electric energy, and strange, alien creatures with wings like membranes flitted through the storms, barely visible in the dim red light. Suddenly, the Nebula-X shuddered violently, throwing the crew forward. Panels flickered, and Amy's interference system blinked ominously on her console. "The field's pushing back hard," she called, her voice tight with concentration as she tried to compensate. The voice of the Queen filled the ship, echoing through the corridors and shaking the walls. It was soft, almost soothing, yet dripping with malice. "I feel your presence, little humans. You cannot hide from me. Your frail ship is like a pebble on my shore. I need only a wave to drown you." Riker gritted his teeth as he steadied himself, glaring defiantly at the dark red horizon visible through the ship's front view. "Ignore her. She wants us to panic. Amy, what's the status on that interference?" Amy worked feverishly at her controls, beads of sweat forming on her brow. "I've got the signal coming online there." She activated the interference wave, and instantly, the oppressive force pushing down on the ship lightened. "Power restored to 80%, Captain," Nathan reported with a breath of relief. Riker felt the ship stabilize as Amy's wave pushed back the Queen's field. "Good work, Amy. Let's get in there, while we still have control." They pushed further down into the red clouds, their destination a massive, spire-like structure on the horizon, jutting out of the planet's surface like a broken tooth. It was surrounded by smaller, hive-like buildings, each pulsating with a dark green glow. "The Queen's domain. That must be her lair," Amy murmured, unable to look away from the structure. Every instinct screamed danger, but they'd come too far to turn back now. As the Nebula-X approached, the Queen's presence became even more palpable. It was as if she were inside their minds, probing their thoughts. Amy shook her head, trying to clear the fog clouding her concentration. The rest of the crew looked similarly dazed, all except Riker, whose sheer force of will kept him steady. Riker's voice was calm but firm. "Focus, everyone. Stay sharp. She's trying to unnerve us. We're almost there." But then, the Queen's voice echoed again, mocking, as if amused by their resistance. "You think you are hunters, coming to my realm with your crude machines and fragile mind. But you are nothing more than insects to be plucked apart, limb by limb." In that instant, Amy's console sparked, and the interference wave shuddered. "She's counteracting the signal," Amy yelled, frantically working to maintain it. "I need more time to keep the wave up. If I can adjust the frequency." But there was no time. Outside the ship, the alien structures around the Queen's spire began to shift, reshaping into massive, multi-legged creatures that moved as if responding to her command. Their eyes glowed with the same malice as the Queen's voice. "She's not alone down there," Riker said grimly, watching the monstrous forms assemble, one after another, creating a formidable barrier around the Queen's spire. "Everyone, ready for defense. This is about to get rough." Amy's hands flew across her console. She felt an almost overwhelming sense of dread, but she refused to let it consume her. With gritted teeth, she activated a boost to the interference wave, pushing it to maximum capacity. As the ship held steady in Goren's hostile atmosphere, surrounded by creatures that seemed to pulse with the Queen's dark energy, Riker's voice cut through the tension. "This is it, crew. We didn't come all this way to turn back now." He met each of their eyes. "We fight our way in." As the Nebula-X hovered above the Queen's spire, her monstrous sentinels shifted and swarmed below, like a living minefield ready to strike. Amy worked frantically, stabilizing the interference wave while the crew readied for combat. It was a race against time. Each second meant the Queen would adapt to their tactic. "Captain, those creatures are closing in," Nathan warned, tracking the alien forms moving in a tightening circle around the ship. Riker gripped his chair, eyes locked on the growing swarm. "Amy, Any chance we can boost the interference long enough to breach her perimeter? Amy's voice was strained. If we push it any harder, it might fry our systems. But, if I reroute some power from auxiliary life support and cycle the interference frequencies faster, we might just break through. Riker nodded without hesitation. Do it. We'll take the risk. Amy made the adjustments, fingers flying across her console. The interference wave surged, creating a buffer around the ship that rippled with blue energy. The field cut through the Queen's influence, momentarily stunning the creatures around them. Taking advantage of the opening, Riker piloted the Nebula-X downward, breaching the defensive circle and inching closer to the towering spire. As they descended, the Queen's mocking voice filled the command room once more. Persistent little flies, aren't you? I must admit, I'm almost amused. Amy bristled, ignoring the taunt. She had worked her entire life for a mission like this, and she refused to let some alien overlord stand in her way. But the pressure of the Queen's presence was like nothing she had experienced. Her voice cut into their minds like shards of ice, probing their thoughts, testing their will. Riker sensed the crew's resolve wavering under the weight of the Queen's mental assault. Stay focused. She's trying to wear us down. We're in control here, not her. They broke through the swirling storm, and the spire came into full view, a gargantuan structure that spiraled up from the ground like a massive thorn. The surface pulsed with dark green veins that radiated a sinister energy, and smaller spires jutted out from the ground like the twisted roots of some alien tree. Amy's console lit up, signaling a massive energy spike from the spire. She glanced at Riker, her expression urgent. Captain, I'm reading an energy surge. It's massive, like she's pooling power for something big. Riker's gaze hardened. Then we need to act fast. We have one shot to destabilize her energy field and get inside. But before he could issue another order, the Queen's voice rang out once more, chillingly confident. You think you can just walk into my domain? How adorably foolish. I've been waiting for you, Captain. With that, the spire pulsed, and a wave of energy rippled outward, bypassing the interference field and striking the ship. Sparks flew, and the ship's lights flickered. Alarms blared as systems began to overload. Damage to core systems. Shields down to 30%. Nathan shouted over the chaos. Amy's fingers flew across the console as she tried to compensate for the Queen's sudden assault. She's locked onto us directly. It's like she's connected to the ship itself. Riker's mind raced. He had expected resistance, but not a full-scale hijacking of their systems. They were vulnerable, trapped in the Queen's reach. The Queen's power was unlike anything they'd encountered. It was as if she were a living, sentient weapon. Amy, can you sever her connection to our systems? He asked, urgency clear in his voice. Amy's jaw was clenched, her hands shaking as she worked. I can try to divert her signal and weaken the connection, but she's learning, Captain. Every move we make, she adapts. Riker turned to the view screen, where the Queen's dark, twisted form loomed within the spire. She was no longer just an alien monarch. She was the planet itself, a force that seemed to have woven her essence into the very air they breathed. And she was watching them, always watching, her icy gaze piercing through their defenses. Then we need to outsmart her, use her own pride against her, Riker said, a grim determination in his eyes. Amy, is there any way we can fool her sensors? Give her a reason to believe she's already won. Amy paused, her mind racing. If they could simulate a complete power collapse, make it appear as though the ship were disabled, they might just have a chance to lure her into lowering her defenses. It's risky, but if we shut down most systems and emit a distress signal, she might assume we're defenseless. Do it, Riker ordered. Everyone, prepare for an emergency shutdown on my mark. If this works, we'll have one last chance to strike. Amy's hands moved swiftly, initiating the simulated shutdown. The ship's lights dimmed, the hum of the engines fell silent, and the Nebula-X drifted in the Queen's orbit, appearing to all intents as if it were dead in the sky. Only the bare minimum systems ran, just enough to maintain life support and their defensive field. Moments later, the Queen's voice filled the command room once more, brimming with smug satisfaction. I told you, my power is absolute. Your little vessel was nothing more than a snack. And now? Amy's heart raced. She watched the energy readings on her console, waiting for the slightest drop in the Queen's defenses. Finally, there it was, a brief fluctuation as her guard lowered, a glimmer of vulnerability. It was just the opening they needed. Riker sprang into action. Now, divert all power to the interference wave, maximum output. Let's hit her with everything we've got. Amy slammed her hand on the console, activating the surge. The interference wave shot forward, crashing against the spire and pushing back the Queen's energy field. The dark green veins covering the spire flickered, their light sputtering under the assault. The Queen's voice filled the room once more, but this time it held a note of fury. You insolent humans! You dare to defy me in my own realm! As the interference wave cut deeper into her defenses, Amy held her breath. They had exposed a weakness, but there was no telling how the Queen would respond. They had drawn her anger, and now the real fight for survival was about to begin. The interference wave surged from the Nebula-X, breaking through the Queen's defenses and forcing a rupture in her energy field. The green light covering the spire dimmed, and for the first time, the ship's sensors detected an entry point. We've got a breach, Amy called, her eyes locked on the console. The Queen's defenses are down, but it won't last long. Riker's voice was resolute. Nathan, keep us steady. Amy, you and Marcus suit up. We're going in. Amy's heart skipped a beat. She had prepared for this possibility, but the reality of it hit hard. They would be entering the Queen's domain with nothing but their suits and equipment, completely vulnerable to her direct influence. Nevertheless, she nodded, steeling herself. This was their one shot, and she was determined to see it through. She and Marcus, the ship's tactical officer, suited up quickly, strapping on all the weapons and tools they could carry. Amy's hand briefly brushed her comm device, double-checking that the interference field was synced to their suits, shielding them, at least partially, from the Queen's mental reach. Captain, Amy said, her voice calm but intense, if we make it to the spire's core, I'll need a distraction to disable her control node. That's where she's channeling power across the planet. Riker's face appeared on her helmet's display. We'll keep her attention on the ship. You focus on getting inside and doing whatever it takes to shut her down. With a final nod, Amy and Marcus stepped into the airlock. The door sealed behind them, and after a beat, the outer hatch opened, revealing the ominous spire below. They launched, descending swiftly through the thin, red atmosphere, the gravity tugging at their suits as they approached the massive, twisted structure. The spire loomed larger with every second, its surface covered in strange, organic patterns that pulsed as if alive. Alien runes and symbols crawled across its surface, glistening with a sickly green hue. Amy forced herself to focus, her heart pounding as they closed in. Almost there, Marcus muttered, his voice low. But as they reached the outer wall, a blinding flash cut through the fog around them. The Queen's voice echoed, filling their helmets with a fury that almost shattered their focus. Do you think I haven't anticipated your every move? Pathetic creatures, I allowed you this far only to witness your final failure. With a sudden, jarring lurch, the surface of the spire shifted, creating an opening that pulled Amy and Marcus inside like a trap closing around them. They tumbled through a series of bioorganic passageways, each lined with walls that seemed to pulse and breathe, alive with the Queen's essence. The deeper they fell, the stronger her presence became, filling their minds with a sense of dread and disorientation. Amy struggled to regain control, activating the stabilizers on her suit. Marcus, stay close. She's trying to mess with our equilibrium. Don't lose focus. But Marcus's breathing was heavy, his voice strained. I feel her, she's inside my head, Amy. His voice dropped to a near whisper, as if fighting an unseen force. I can't shake it. Amy activated a neural dampener on his suit, hoping it would shield him from the worst of the Queen's influence. She put a steady hand on his shoulder. Stay with me, Marcus. We're almost there. Focus on my voice. The Queen's voice filled the space around them, dripping with amusement. Poor little soldier, so fragile, so easily broken. I could peel you apart with a thought? Ignoring her, Amy pressed forward, guiding Marcus through the twisting corridors. Every inch of the spire felt charged with malice, and the walls pulsed in time with the Queen's words, like the beating of an enormous, malevolent heart. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast, cavernous space where the Queen's energy field was concentrated. In the center stood a massive node, pulsating with green light, tendrils extending from it like roots, anchoring it into the walls and ceiling. This was the Queen's neural hub, the source of her power. Amy scanned it quickly, formulating a plan. The core node is reinforced with layers of alien tech. It's going to take a sustained blast to overload it. Marcus steadied himself, his voice stronger now. Then let's give her everything we've got. They aimed their energy weapons at the node, unleashing a barrage of high-energy blasts. The room shook as the beams impacted the node, cracking the outer shell and causing sparks of green energy to splinter off. But the Queen's presence surged around them, a sudden wave of psychic energy that hit like a sledgehammer. Marcus staggered, clutching his helmet as her voice penetrated his mind, twisting and prying into his fears. "Did you really think you could break me?" "I am eternal," she hissed, her tone mocking. Marcus's breathing grew labored, his movements sluggish as he fought her control. "Amy, she's too strong." Amy gritted her teeth, refusing to let the Queen's influence overwhelm her. She activated her suit's EMP charge, a last-resort device designed to short-circuit nearby tech. She knew it would disrupt their own systems temporarily, but it was the only way to buy them time. "Marcus, hold on," she said, pressing the button. A wave of energy burst from her suit, filling the chamber with a blinding flash. The EMP overloaded the Queen's psychic wave, momentarily severing her connection to them. Marcus stumbled but steadied himself, breathing heavily as he regained control. "Thanks, Amy," he muttered, shaken but resolute. "Don't thank me yet," she replied, reorienting herself. "We still need to destroy that node." They resumed their assault, each blast tearing deeper into the core node's defenses. The Queen's voice, now tinged with desperation, reverberated through the chamber. "You cannot comprehend the forces you are trifling with. I am beyond you. I am infinite." But Amy sensed a crack in her resolve, a hint of fear behind the arrogance. For the first time, it seemed the Queen realized they could actually harm her. Ignoring the mounting pressure in her head, Amy pushed forward, pouring every ounce of power into the node. As the last of their combined energy beams hit the core, a high-pitched scream filled the chamber, piercing through their helmet. The node fractured, green light spilling from its cracks. The Queen's psychic hold on the spire faltered, her voice distorting and weakening. "You will not win." With a final burst, the core exploded, sending a shockwave that threw Amy and Marcus against the chamber walls. When they opened their eyes, the pulsating green lights had dimmed, and the Queen's voice had gone silent. For a brief moment there was only the eerie, empty stillness of the spire around them. They had struck at the heart of the Queen's power, but Amy knew it wasn't over yet. The silence felt like the calm before the storm, and somewhere deep within the spire, she could feel the Queen's presence still lurking, gathering strength for one last, devastating attack. Amy and Marcus lay dazed in the quiet of the core chamber, the dark walls flickering with the dying embers of green light from the shattered node. The silence was unsettling, an unnatural lull, as if the entire spire itself were holding its breath. But Amy knew better than to trust this quiet. They had weakened the Queen, but the final blow was yet to come. She pulled herself up, feeling the ache in her muscles from the impact. "Marcus, you good to move?" Marcus groaned but managed a shaky nod. "Still here. But I don't think she's done with us yet." As if in response, a low hum began to resonate through the walls, growing louder with each passing second. The spire trembled, and the green veins along its surface started to glow again, this time pulsing faster, with an almost frantic rhythm. Amy's helmet crackled with static, and then the Queen's voice returned, faint but filled with pure, unfiltered hatred. You have defiled my sanctum. Do you think you can leave now, with my power within your reach? I am the soul of this world. I am the Hive itself. Riker's voice broke through the comms, tense and hurried. Amy, the Spire's defenses are reactivating. We're picking up massive energy surges heading straight for you too. Whatever you did, it's only making her angrier. Amy clenched her fists, her mind racing. Captain, we damaged the core node, but she's redirecting power from the rest of the Hive to sustain herself. It's like we've cornered her, but she's still holding the knife. So what do we do? Marcus asked, glancing at the pulsating walls around them. Amy's gaze hardened. We force her hand. She's not just one entity, she's connected to every living thing in this spire, maybe even the whole planet. If we can find a way to disrupt her connection to the Hive, we could sever her control for good. But just as she spoke, a tremor shook the spire, and the walls seemed to come alive. Thick, dark tendrils extended from the walls, writhing and twisting as they reached toward Amy and Marcus like hungry serpents. The Queen's voice rose to a fevered pitch, laced with rage and desperation. You will be consumed. Your defiance is meaningless. My children will devour you whole. Marcus fired his energy weapon at the tendrils, but each blast only slowed them down momentarily before more surged forward, twisting and coiling around them. Amy's mind raced as she fired her own weapon, her breath coming in rapid bursts as they fought to keep the tendrils at bay. There has to be another way out, she muttered, glancing around the chamber for any sign of an escape route. Her eyes landed on a smaller conduit near the node, pulsing with a faint blue light, an emergency energy line connecting to the rest of the Hive. Marcus, over there, she shouted, pointing to the conduit. If we can get inside, it might take us deeper into the Hive's control center. It's risky, but it's better than staying here as her snack. Marcus didn't hesitate. He blasted the conduit's casing, creating an opening just large enough for them to slip through. Together, they climbed into the narrow passage, wriggling through the claustrophobic tunnel as the walls throbbed with the Queen's fury. The further they went, the louder her voice became, until it was all they could hear, a relentless, pulsing chant that filled their minds with dread. At last, the tunnel opened up into a cavernous space, revealing a massive, pulsating brain-like structure suspended by tendrils that extended throughout the spire. This was it, the true heart of the Hive, where the Queen's consciousness and the planet's life force were fused together in a single, monstrous entity. Amy stared in awe, feeling a shiver run down her spine. This is where she's connected to everything. The Hive itself. The Queen's voice was louder than ever, echoing through the chamber. You should have fled while you had the chance, humans. Now, you will die in the heart of my being. Without hesitation, Amy and Marcus raised their weapons, unleashing everything they had on the pulsing mass before them. Beams of energy cut through the dark tendrils, and the central mass shuddered, green energy spilling out in explosive bursts. But the Queen's response was immediate. Tendrils shot forward from all sides, blocking their shots and tightening around their legs and arms, immobilizing them. Amy struggled against the grip, her suit straining under the pressure as the Queen's laughter filled her mind. I am eternal. I will feed on your minds, make you part of me. There is no escape. But as Amy's vision blurred, her eyes landed on a final option, a backup generator node at the far end of the chamber, dimly lit but still active. If she could overload it, it might create a chain reaction powerful enough to destroy the Hive's core. With the last of her strength, she twisted her arm free just enough to reach her emergency beacon, activating a high-frequency signal that would trigger the generator's failsafe. She locked eyes with Marcus, who understood immediately, his face set with grim determination. This is it, Marcus, she whispered. Get ready to run. The generator's core began to glow, its energy building to a critical level. The Queen's voice rose in panic, her hold on the tendrils wavering as she sensed the impending explosion. No. You cannot, I am beyond. Amy and Marcus wrenched free of the tendrils just as the generator exploded, flooding the chamber with blinding light. They sprinted back toward the tunnel, barely making it inside as the shock wave tore through the hive, disintegrating the core structure and sending pieces of the Queen's consciousness scattering into oblivion. As they tumbled through the passageway, the Queen's voice faded into a whisper, a final, desperate cry echoing through the hive as her presence disintegrated into nothingness. "I am eternal." Then, silence. Amy and Marcus crawled out of the wreckage, bruised and battered, but alive. Behind them, the spire collapsed, the tendrils dissolving into dust as the Queen's power faded. They stood on the barren surface of Goren, watching as the towering structure crumbled to the ground, leaving only silence in its wake. Amy activated her comm, her voice hoarse but victorious. "Captain, mission accomplished. The Queen is gone." Riker's voice came back, filled with pride and relief. "We'll be ready to bring you back up." "Excellent work, Amy. The galaxy owes you both." As Amy and Marcus waited for extraction, they looked back one last time at the ruins of the Queen's hive. The nightmare was over, but the memory of her presence, the feeling of a mind so vast, so cold, and so malevolent, would stay with them forever. They had defeated the Queen, but Amy knew that somewhere out in the galaxy, other threats waited, watching, learning. But for now, they had won, and that was enough. Amy and Marcus stood on the barren ground of Goren, the silence of the collapsed hive pressing down on them. In the distance, the Nebula-X descended, its engines humming as it landed amidst the rubble of the spire. Riker and a medical team exited, rushing toward them. "Amy! Marcus!" Riker's relief was evident, and as he approached, he clapped a hand on each of their shoulders. "You made it. I knew you would." Amy managed a tired smile, still processing the intensity of what they'd survived. "The hive's gone, Captain. We broke the Queen's control node and triggered a collapse. She's finished." Marcus nodded, though he looked distant, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But Captain, I don't think it was as simple as we thought. The Queen was connected to everything here. She was more than just one entity. I could feel her consciousness splintering as we destroyed the core, but parts of her, they didn't disappear." Riker's face grew serious. "Explain?" Marcus took a shaky breath. "It felt like she was transferring herself into something else, scattering fragments of herself across Goren as the hive collapsed. She's gone, but it's like pieces of her remain." Amy exchanged a glance with Riker. "If that's true, we may have just scattered the Queen's consciousness across the entire planet." Riker's jaw tightened. "Then we're not done yet. I want this entire area scanned. Search for any residual energy readings or signs of her consciousness. We can't leave until we're sure she's neutralized." The crew began a systematic search around the remains of the spire, deploying drones and scanning devices. But as they ventured further from the collapsed site, strange things began to happen. Shadows flickered where no shadows should be, and distant echoes filled the air, like whispers carried on the wind. Amy knelt by a small piece of debris from the spire, studying it carefully. The shard was pulsing faintly with green light, a remnant of the Queen's energy. She activated her scanner, but as it began to analyze the shard, her headset crackled with static, and the faintest of voices whispered through it. "I am eternal." Amy jerked back, her breath catching. She glanced around, but none of the others seemed to hear it. Her pulse quickened, and she tried to steady her breathing. It had to be the stress, the aftershock of being in the Queen's presence, she reasoned. But the whisper came again, this time accompanied by a faint but unmistakable presence pressing against her mind. "Amy, you did not kill me, you merely set me free." Amy's heart pounded. She had heard that voice before, in the depths of the hive, in the moments when the Queen had wormed her way into her thoughts. It was impossible, but it was happening. Somehow, the Queen was still here, lurking in the fragments left behind. Before Amy could warn the others, her vision blurred, and the world shifted around her. She saw flashes of something, dark valleys, endless storms, a vast network of tendrils buried beneath the planet's surface. The images faded just as quickly as they appeared, leaving her disoriented. "Amy, you all right?" Riker's voice broke through her haze, his face filled with concern. Amy nodded, struggling to focus. Captain, I think she's still here. Somehow, her consciousness has fragmented. She's using the remnants of the Hive to project herself across the planet. Riker frowned, absorbing the implications. Then we need to destroy every piece of the Hive. No fragment, no matter how small, can be left behind. As they moved to execute Riker's orders, strange occurrences intensified around the crew. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and whispers filled the air. Some of the crew members looked unsettled, casting nervous glances around as if sensing an invisible presence. The Queen was here, everywhere, watching them, biding her time. Marcus's voice came over the comms, tense. Captain, I'm seeing movement to the east. Drones are picking up something alive. It doesn't match any life form we've encountered. Amy and Riker exchanged wary glances. Send in a recon team. Keep everyone on alert, Riker ordered. As the recon team moved toward the anomaly, they encountered a series of strange, vine-like growths pulsating with a greenish glow. The plants twisted and writhed as if alive, stretching toward the crew as they passed, almost as though reaching out to touch them. Amy knelt beside one, running her scanner over it. Her heart sank as the readings confirmed her worst fears. The plants were embedded with traces of the Queen's energy. She's using the planet's flora as conduits for her consciousness, Amy muttered. If she's spread herself across the ecosystem, she could outlast us indefinitely. Riker's expression was grim. We're running out of time. If she regains enough control, she might be able to fully reform. As they withdrew from the area, the vines followed, creeping closer and closer. Amy felt the Queen's thoughts press against her mind once more, insidious and cold. You think you can destroy me, but I am everywhere. I am reborn in every shadow, every leaf, every drop of water on this world. You are nothing but dust to me. Amy shook her head, refusing to let the Queen's influence take hold. Captain, if we're going to stop her, we need a way to disrupt her energy network across the entire planet. Riker considered this, his gaze fixed on the eerie green glow surrounding them. If her energy is embedded in the planet itself, maybe we can destabilize it. If we create a controlled seismic event near the spire's remains, it could act like a shockwave, destabilizing her energy field across Goren. Marcus's voice crackled through the comms. That's risky, Captain. It could cause massive tectonic shifts? Riker nodded, grimly aware of the stakes. We don't have another choice. If we don't stop her now, she'll just keep coming back. Amy took a steadying breath, her mind already working out the details. I can set up the charges around the spire's remains. If we detonate them at key points, it could disrupt the energy flow enough to sever her connection. But we'll have to be quick. The Queen will sense what we're doing. Then let's get to it, Riker said. Everyone, prepare for seismic charges. This is our last chance to end this once and for all. The crew moved with purpose, setting up the charges in a circle around the collapsed spire, each device synced to Amy's console. As they placed the final charge, the ground trembled slightly, a reminder of the volatile nature of Goren's terrain. Amy felt a chill run down her spine, the Queen's presence closing in around them like a tightening noose. She whispered through gritted teeth, almost done. Just a few more minutes. The Queen's voice came again, laced with fury. You cannot destroy me. I am life eternal, I am the Hive, and you are mere insects. As Amy synced the last of the charges, she felt the Queen's energy surge around her, the air thickening as though it were pressing down on them. She activated the detonation timer, set to give them just enough time to evacuate. But in the final seconds, a dark presence closed in, filling her mind with the Queen's rage and desperation. I will not be defeated by you. The charges began to blink, and Amy shouted, Everyone, fall back. We have 20 seconds to get clear. The crew sprinted away from the spire's remains, their footsteps pounding against the ground as the timer ticked down. As they reached a safe distance, they dove to the ground, bracing themselves. Riker's voice was calm but resolute. We've done all we can. Goren is sealed. Let's leave this place to the ashes. Amy looked out one last time at the barren landscape, her chest heavy with relief tinged with lingering unease. They had subdued the Queen, but she knew that somewhere in the endless expanse of stars, other dangers waited, each one ready to test the limits of their courage and resilience. As the Nebula-X ascended from Goren, the planet faded from view, left behind as a quiet, forbidden world, a silent tomb for an ancient, vengeful mind. As the Nebula-X broke free of Goren's atmosphere, the barren planet shrank behind them, fading into the endless void. The crew was silent, each member processing the harrowing mission they'd survived. Riker sat in the command chair, his gaze fixed on the main screen as the ship ascended away from Goren, now classified as a dead zone, a world forever marked by the Queen's dark legacy. Amy, status report, Riker commanded, his voice steady but low. Amy scanned the control panels, confirming that all readings were stable. The EMP had successfully neutralized the Queen's fragmented consciousness across the planet. Energy levels were balanced, and no further anomalies were detected. Systems are clear, Captain. No residual signatures of the Queen detected. We've isolated her influence within Goren's atmosphere. Riker exhaled, leaning back as the tension in his face softened. Good work. Prepare to log the planet as a restricted zone. No life forms, no drones, no transmissions. No one sets foot on Goren again. As Amy logged the restrictions, she couldn't shake the feeling that Goren's stillness wasn't truly peace. There was an unease that gnawed at her, a faint echo of the Queen's words from the final moments. You cannot cage the infinite. It lingered like a whisper in her mind, challenging everything they believed about the containment. Once the log was complete, Amy made her way to the observation deck, hoping to gain a sense of closure by watching Goren fade from view. She was joined by Marcus, who carried the same haunted look, as though he, too, was waiting for some kind of finality. They stood in silence, both gazing out at the distant, desolate planet. Marcus broke the silence first, his voice barely audible. Do you think she's really gone? Amy hesitated, her eyes locked on Goren's faint glow against the stars. I want to believe it, but beings like her, ones that survive across millennia, woven into the very ecosystem of a planet, they don't just vanish. We may have fractured her, but I don't think she's truly dead. Marcus nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. Then we've done all we can. It's up to Goren to hold her now. The quiet of the observation deck was interrupted as Riker's voice came over the comm. All crew, prepare for jump. We're setting course for the outer colonies. Time to leave this haunted place behind. Amy took one last look at Goren before heading back to the bridge. The weight of the mission pressed down on her, a reminder that the line between victory and survival was thin, and some battles left scars that went deeper than physical wounds. As they readied for jump, Nathan's console lit up with a faint alert. He frowned, quickly running a diagnostic. Captain, I'm picking up it's faint, but there's an encrypted signal coming from one of our external memory caches. Riker glanced over. A signal? From where? Nathan hesitated. It's on an isolated channel. The cache it's using is one we deployed early in the mission, one of the reconnaissance beacons. Amy's stomach twisted. The beacons had been deployed around Goren during their initial survey. If one had somehow been influenced or repurposed by the Queen, it could mean that a fragment of her consciousness had managed to escape. She leaned over Nathan's console, studying the faint transmission's metadata. There was something chillingly familiar about it. The signal pattern matched the Queen's fragmented transmissions from the Hive. Captain, Amy said, her voice tense. It's possible the Queen infected one of the beacons before the final detonation. She could have transmitted part of herself as a backup, a way to ensure her survival if her primary core was destroyed. Riker's face hardened, realizing the implications. If she's riding our signal, she could be with us, buried somewhere in our systems, dormant but waiting. Marcus spoke up, his voice low. We can't take her with us. If even a fragment of her survives, she could spread again, infect other worlds. Riker nodded, his jaw clenched with resolve. Then we isolate the beacon's data cache, purge every trace of it. Nathan, I want it quarantined from the rest of the system. Amy, work with him. Don't leave a single byte unscanned. The bridge fell into intense concentration as Amy and Nathan combed through the beacon's data. It was complex, layered with encryption that defied their standard decryption tools. Each attempt to access it revealed more complex coding, almost as if the data were alive, adapting to their method. She's here, Amy muttered. Even in fragments, she's learned from us. She's woven her essence into the code itself, like a virus. Riker's expression grew grim. Then we delete it. Wipe the cache completely. Amy's fingers hovered over the console, knowing that wiping the cache meant destroying all data collected on Goren, years of reconnaissance and vital intel. But the risk was too great. The Queen's survival posed a danger that outweighed any loss of data. Just as she prepared to execute the deletion command, the lights flickered, and her screen filled with green symbols, the same alien runes from the Queen's hive. Her voice echoed through the console, faint but filled with venom. You think you can silence me? I am part of you now. I am every shadow, every doubt. I will return. Amy steeled herself, her jaw clenched. Not this time. She activated the final wipe, watching as the alien runes vanished, pixel by pixel, until only empty code remained. The Queen's voice faded with the last fragments, dissolving into static until, at last, there was silence. Nathan confirmed the purge, relief palpable in his voice. Cache wiped, Captain. She's gone. Riker exhaled, nodding as he turned to the crew. Prepare for jump. Let's get as far from Goren as possible. As the Nebula-X prepared for its departure, Amy felt a weight lift, but the memory of the Queen's presence lingered. The vastness of space was filled with countless worlds, each harboring unknown dangers. Goren and the Queen were now a part of that history, a reminder that in the vast, dark stretches of the universe, not every mind could be understood, nor every evil extinguished. With the jump coordinates set, the Nebula-X engaged its engines, accelerating into the stars. Goren, with all its secrets and darkness, faded from view, a ghostly, distant world left to the silence of space. But as they moved deeper into the cosmos, Amy held on to a solemn conviction. They might have left Goren behind, but the Queen's final words would echo within her forever, a reminder of resilience and the infinite persistence of the unknown. For now, however, they were free.